This is the 2026 Honda Passport Trail Sport Elite, which is Honda's most capable off-road SUV, and it actually did really well on the trails last night. It handled well, it was a great off-roading vehicle, but as you can see, it does have a little bit of a problem, which is that it does not come with a full-size spare, only a donut, at least in its stock form. You can get a full-size spare, it does mount into the cargo area, but this is all we had. Last night on the trail, we did hit a nail, and with about 10 miles to go, we were losing air pretty fast, and about halfway down, we only had about 12 PSI, but luckily we ran into Noah, who had an inflator, got us aired back up so we could make it all the way down, so we could find a place to put on the donut. So a huge thank you to Noah last night. And now, I'm gonna see if I can get this thing patched and get this review started, and maybe even get this thing cleaned up. All right, so we got the tire patched and it's a little bit cleaner after a light wash, so let's get into it because this is an exciting vehicle. It's a complete redesign for the Honda Passport, and this time they did it right, and the sales actually just speak for themselves. It's already setting record sales for the Honda Passport line, and it's kind of easy to see why. The last generation Passport didn't really do all that much to separate itself from the Honda Pilot, but this right here is a completely different vehicle, at least from the look, because it is still based on the Honda Pilot. It just looks a lot better, it looks a lot more rugged, and I gotta say it is quite a bit cooler, and it even drives differently with a kind of softer suspension that makes it feel quite a bit more trucky. However, it is still a unibody SUV, so it isn't exactly gonna be that hardcore off-road vehicle like a 4Runner or a Bronco, but instead it's kind of just trying to bridge the gap of those vehicles with a more capable unibody SUV, kind of like a Jeep Grand Cherokee, for example. But despite that, even though this isn't exactly a one-to-one comparison with something like the 4Runner, because of that and a variety of other reasons, you will actually see these vehicles cross-shopped with cars like the 4Runner. For starters, under the hood, you get a naturally aspirated V6 instead of, say, a turbocharged 4-cylinder. This thing drives like a V6, it sounds like a V6, and it's a bit more simple, which is something a lot of people appreciate in this segment. At 285 horsepower, though, this updated V6 is only giving you 5 more horsepower than the previous generation, which is great, but consider this. This is about 500 pounds heavier than the last generation. It's a bit more boxy, it's got wider tires, and it's overall a larger vehicle. So although 5 horsepower is nice, it's not exactly gonna feel as spirited as the previous generation Passport. So I'm not exactly gonna say it's underpowered, but a little more power would have been appreciated. Secondly, this thing looks pretty good, and let's just do a little walk around starting with the front, where we have this kind of Passport stamped into the front bumper there. We have our big Honda logo, but unfortunately, unlike the Pilot, that logo does not house the radar system, which I believe is hidden under here, where we also have the 360 camera here with a little washer that honestly doesn't really help all that much. And then, of course, we have up here the fake hood scoop, and also our Trail Sport badge with these kind of cool amber daytime running lights, which you saw earlier. They look fantastic. We also down below have LED fog lamps and these orange recovery hooks. Honda did a little demo showcasing that they can hold 3 Honda Passports, which is cool. They're also kind of designed to break away in the event of an accident. Down below, we do have our underbody protection. We do have skid plates under there, which is kind of nice. And moving on to the side, you will find 18-inch alloys wrapped in 31-inch tires, which are the tallest and widest tires ever fit on a Honda vehicle, which is cool. Unfortunately, I didn't have too much luck there with a nail puncturing it earlier, the other tire, but this is overall a good vehicle. It looks good, nice meaty all-terrain tire. I like it. Now, over here we do have power folding mirrors. They are kind of smaller mirrors for a vehicle of this size. We also have smart entry over in the front and the back, which is nice for the Passport Elite, which is good. We got our roof rails on the top, and over here we have this little section of the top right here, which is intentionally left unpainted. So if you want to lean something like a surfboard or some fishing rods on it, you can totally do that. Now moving over to the back, this thing definitely kind of gives that Bronco-like impression for a lot of people. I see it all the time. It definitely does look like a Bronco. I parked it right next to one. It does look like one, but keep in mind, In person, this thing is a much larger vehicle, and it kind of reminds me of a Hummer in terms of dimensions because of how wide it is. You got these really wide fenders on the side. This thing is wider than a 4Runner, it's wider than a Bronco. It's only a half an inch from being as wide as a Ford F-150, which is kind of insane. This is a very wide vehicle. Unfortunately, despite having a really large window, you don't have a rear window that opens, which is a bit of a shame, and you also have this exposed wiper. It would have been nicer if they hid it under there or something like that. You also have down below a very large passport stamp and your tow hitch, which is good for 5,000 pounds. And it also actually doubles as a kind of skid plate when you're off-roading, a little bit of underside bumper protection there. All right, let's have a look at the trunk with the little kick sensor there with this Trail Sport Elite. And you will find that this thing has a massive trunk. It is very, very spacious in here. As you can see, very tall. There is no third row in here, unlike the Pilot, so you got a lot of room. Plus, you also have room underneath the floor over here. Very nice large bin. Lots of storage on the sides. More storage over there. These are actually really big. You can actually fit this entire camera bag in there. It is very large. You also got another one on the other side. But of course, under here you will find the donut spare tire, which was already used earlier today, as you saw. But yeah, that's it when it comes to storage. Fortunately though, if you really are serious about taking this off-roading, there is a kind of accessory where you can put a spare tire over here. It does take up a lot of storage space, but it is kind of an option. What's also great is you do get a completely flat floor, which is kind of rare for this segment, which is awesome. And because there's so much space back here, I can actually completely lay flat back here, and it is just awesome. I mean, I can fit, even with the cargo door closed, I can lay back here. I still got a little bit of headspace, nothing to support my head, but you could totally lay back here if you want to. With these seats folded down, you just have so much room. It's awesome in here. Now, if you want to tailgate in your Passport, you can sit back here because you do have a flat floor, but unfortunately, you don't really have that much headspace, so you kind of have to really sit in here, or you kind of have to really sit on the edge. But you can do it thanks to the flat floor. And you also do have a 110 outlet back here, which is nice. It's only rated for 150 watts, but better than nothing. Now, where the Passport really shines is in the back seats. Now, I'm 6 feet tall. I've got this front seat as far back as it can go. I've still got several inches of legroom. I've got plenty of headroom. It is just so spacious back here. Plus, it's extremely practical. This door has 2 cup holders in it, plus more storage over here and more storage on the bottom. I've also got a little pocket over here, a pocket over here, and you do get a completely flat floor, which is just nice and convenient, especially if you're going to have a third passenger. You've also got heated seats back here, climate controls, and your AC vents, even USB ports and a 110 outlet. Plus, if you need more cup holders, you got them over here. So the back seats of the Passport are really, really great. I did forget to mention that you do have a sunshade back here to block out all the body-on-frame SUV haters. And then, of course, sadly, this is a big miss for the Passport, is that these back seats have zero customization when it comes to reclinability. You just got one setting, which is a big miss. It would have been nice considering how much space there is in here, especially in the back. We've run out of light, so I'm going to go over this front section tomorrow, but let's have a look at how the Passport looks at night. Starting with the approach lighting, when you walk up to the vehicle, you do get approach lighting, the interior lights, and the door handles. Not the door handles, the door mirror is supposed to be illuminated, but unfortunately, this thing's been very finicky. There is kind of a puddle light down here, which turns on when you walk up to the car, when the thing is unlocked, but unfortunately, it just hasn't been working. It's worked a couple of times. Yesterday, it just wasn't working at all, and it was working this morning after going off-roading all night, so there probably is some kind of wiring issue there. That is kind of unfortunate. Now, to kind of just step in here, you do get a greeting on this screen over here, which is cool. When I close this door, you will see in the middle there, you get a cool little animation, which is totally out of focus. I'll just have to B-roll that. Let's have a look at the daytime running lights on this car, which are just awesome, especially at nighttime. I love that you have amber daytime running lights, which are so cool. They also function as a turn signal. They just get brighter. I'll show you that in a second. But it is very cool, very nice to see, very different from the Honda Pilot, and of course this is exclusive to the Passport Trail Sport. The other Passport trims come with a white daytime running lights. We also have our LED fog lights on over there on the bottom, and these are a reflector style headlight, which is actually something that I prefer. Normally a lot of cars have projector style headlights, but I'm not a big fan of that. I think LED reflector is awesome. We do have the high beam in the middle, which is an automatic high beam light. I think that's also pretty cool. But one thing I do appreciate about this car is the headlight line isn't very high. With these headlights, you're not exactly blinding other people on the road. It's just kind of nice. Whenever I'm behind a sedan and a large SUV, I always feel bad when I'm like illuminating their kind of side mirrors because I know I'm blinding the driver. With this car, the headlights kind of just reach just above the kind of trunk of their car, so I know I'm not blinding them. Now over in the back, we have this kind of T-shaped, very soft tail light, and then of course we are using incandescent turn signals over in the back. All right, so there's the brake, and here's reverse. All right, back inside of the Honda Passport, where we basically have an improved version of the Honda Pilot's interior, which is already a great interior. For example, the door is very, very useful. You have tons of storage in there. You also have a very nice cup holder, which fits large water bottles, and you have this kind of cool digital print on the door as well. The dashboard is also very great. It is lined with leather. It has some storage in there with this kind of interesting topography rubberized mat in there, which is nice. The seats in this car are also very comfortable. You got Trail Sport on here. They are heated and ventilated, which is great. However, the ventilation in these seats aren't exactly the best in the industry, and they are quite a bit louder. The big improvement for this car though is this infotainment screen, which is a nice update from the Pilot, which only has a 9-inch display. This comes with a 12-inch display. It also comes with wireless CarPlay, Android Auto, and Google built-in on all trims, which is a great thing to see. Normally Honda kind of excludes Google built-in to the top trims, so that's a nice improvement. If I push this button right here, I do have access to the 360 camera, which isn't the best in the world, but it's certainly decent. You also have the backup camera here as well. Not the highest quality, but I do like that you have a nice wide view with it. Of course, you also got your physical climate controls, your wireless charger down here, a little more storage, and your kind of push button shift controls, which I know a lot of people aren't the biggest fan of, but there are some advantages to it. For example, when you turn off the car, you don't have to put it into park, you just turn it off and it automatically goes into park. You also have your drive mode selector down here, your downhill assist, your start stop defeat, and your parking brake. Plus, you do have quite a bit of storage inside your center cubby. And finally, you do of course get this very large panoramic roof, which is kind of nice. So what was it like to go off-roading with the Honda Passport, outside from getting a puncture at our turnaround point over 5,000 feet up a mountain? Well, it was actually pretty decent. I did the same trail with the Honda Ridgeline Trail Sport last year without going up as far, and to be clear, this isn't a hardcore trail or anything. It's mostly a dirt path with some uneven terrain and larger rocks here and there, which at time made the Trail Watch camera quite useful. And while we did get a puncture, since we hit a nail or some scrap metal, it wasn't really the Passport's fault. While it doesn't help with on-road performance, those larger tires and heavy underbody skid plates do help give you a little more confidence on the trail, especially as you encounter larger rocks, with some of them inevitably being kicked up and bouncing off of those plates. However, the lack of a full-size spare does throw all of that confidence away, and it was pretty dumb of me to go off-roading even on a light trail without a full-size spare, and especially so without an inflator. It was a pretty stressful situation, but we lucked out. Not only did our hissing tire take us about 6 miles or halfway down, we still had about 11 psi left and thankfully ran into help, getting us the rest of the way down so we could find a more suitable place to put on the donut. On that note, I really do hope Honda figures out a way to implement a full-size spare in a better way, especially considering that the Pilot comes with one. Although we were nowhere near the Passport's capability, it was still enough to get an idea of how it behaves off-road. The softer suspension was noticeable, especially compared to the Ridgeline, and it was quite a bit more comfortable off-road. Over dirt sections, it was very compliant and very comfortable. It felt really insulated from the road and very quiet, with the bulk of the noise coming from our water bottles rattling in the large cup holders. However, around less even terrain and larger bumps, you could feel the Passport's improved yet still limited suspension travel, as well as that stiffer unibody chassis tossing you around. This is something you can notice just driving over a speed bump though. It feels more connected to the road, or in this case, the terrain, especially making larger bumps a bit more punishing and a little uncomfortable. This Passport demo gives you a little bit of an idea of just how stiff this chassis is. Now, how about how it does off the trail? On the road with the Honda Passport, where I think it does a little better on-road than off-road, but this is kind of a vehicle where you can tell that Honda is trying something different. This is based on the Pilot, but it does not drive like a Pilot in any way. The suspension in this car is a lot softer. It is really, really soft. When you're driving around bumps and stuff, you can kind of feel the car just like floating along and things like that. And also, they've done things like make the engine noise less isolated. So when I floor it, you can really hear the sound of that V6, which is kind of a nice thing. Even at lower RPMs, you can hear the sound of the V6 as opposed to the Pilot, where it's so insulated from the cabin that you really just couldn't hear anything. Now on the freeway, you do get a bit of road noise. This car does have acoustic glass, which helps out with wind noise from this boxy shape. And overall, it's a pretty quiet vehicle. I mean, if you're comparing this to like a 4Runner or a Land Cruiser or something like that, this is an absolute dream to drive in comparison. It is very, very nice and comfortable. But if you're comparing this to like a traditional unibody SUV like a Pilot, then it is a slight step back. It honestly feels very trucky in the sense that with the suspension being so soft, if you like brake hard, the car kind of noses down a little bit, which is something you see in trucks and not kind of unibody. So it is definitely a different driving experience. Of course, you do get access to Honda's latest driver assist technology, the latest version of Honda Sensing. It does a pretty good job centering within the lane. I haven't really had any issues with it. It doesn't seem as capable as the Honda Civics in terms of taking curves, but it's certainly more than what you need. It's definitely a great thing to have on longer drives if you're trying to eliminate driver fatigue. It's not exactly an autopilot system, but it's certainly competitive within the segment. Many people will say that this has no business being a rugged off-road SUV, and to that, I've got two things I want to say. Firstly is that Honda doesn't have a dedicated body-on-frame rugged SUV that they can rely on to make as rugged as possible. All they have are unibody SUVs, and with the Passport, they essentially took the Pilot, dressed it up a bit, and made it as off-roadsy as they possibly could, and I gotta say they did a pretty decent job. Also, keep in mind that with the Land Rover Defender, that in 2020 was moved over to a unibody platform thanks to all of the benefits of being a unibody SUV, such as a more spacious cabin and a much more comfortable, better riding vehicle. And secondly is that a lot of people forget that the auto industry is kind of like a fashion industry. Just like how there's people who wear basketball shoes who never play ball, there are people who will buy sports cars that never track them, or people who buy trucks who never haul things, or people who buy rugged off-road SUVs who never take them off-roading, or if they do, just kind of light off-roading or moderate off-roading. And if that's the case, then I think the Honda Passport really is the way to go. This thing offers an amazing ride quality, it's extremely spacious and practical on the inside, and it looks really cool and is more rugged. Plus, this thing also kind of wins when it comes to being a value play. If you compare the Honda Passport to the 4Runner when it comes to value, the base model Honda Passport, the RTL, comes with leather seats, a nice 12-inch infotainment system, a power tailgate, and even all-wheel drive for just under $45,000. And if you compare that to a SR5 4Runner with part-time four-wheel drive, it's only a couple $100s more, and in comparison, the 4Runner is a much more basic vehicle for that price. So in terms of serving that specific audience, especially at that price point where SUVs have gotten quite a bit more expensive, I gotta say that the Honda Passport truly is a home run. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Thanks to Honda for loaning me the Honda Passport for a week, and I hope to see you on the next video.